So thank you for joining another episode of the Financial Literacy Network podcast. I'm Bob Stammers, and I lead the FLN, which is made up of CFA charter holders that have significant experience in designing, implementing, and managing financial literacy and investor education programs. And what we're all about is to help CFA societies and other like-minded organizations really understand the principles and best practices in designing and implementing a financial literacy or investor education program. So today's guest is Jean Natali, CFA, who is a board member of the FLN. Jean, thank you so much for joining us today.
Bob, it's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you for the invitation.
So just to give our audience some background, Jean is the CEO and co-founder of Troutwood, a financial technology company founded out of the Carnegie Mellon University Schwartz Center. He's a chartered financial analyst and also a board member of CFA Society Pittsburgh and a part-time lecturer at the University of Pittsburgh as well. Jean is an award-winning author and a regular keynote investment and education conference speaker across the country. So Jean, in addition to learning about the financial literacy initiative at CFA Society Pittsburgh, I really want to discuss your financial education technology at Troutwood and how organizations might incorporate it into their financial literacy or investor education programs. So first off, can you give us a brief introduction into Troutwood and what your goals were when you started it?
Absolutely. At Troutwood, we are building financial planning and investment education tools for Gen Z. That's the first inning business plan, with the second inning to then be able to grow with that audience as they graduate in spring of 2022. We have two flagship products. The first is a financial planning application, the Troutwood app, that puts an institutional quality plan in the hands of every 17 and 18-year-old and candidly any high school in America. And then the second is an investment education map. And Bob, I'm happy to dive a little deeper into both of those. But the hypothesis and the base case test to building those, I've personally spoken in over 700 unique high school and college classrooms. And in all 700 plus of those, I have asked the same two questions. They started as curiosity questions. And then as I saw trends develop, they became kind of a passion. But the first question always to a high school and college student audience was, do you have a Roth IRA? The common kind of percent was 1 to 3 students in any classroom. So very small number. And I would immediately follow that question with, do you know what the S&P 500 is? And frequently not a single hand would raise to the second question, which allowed me to then, feed for more. Come on, take your best guess. And usually we're able to get a student or two that could stumble into the answer of, it has something to do with stocks.
Did they know what a Roth IRA was?
Even the one, that's a great question. Even the 1 to 3 students that had one usually would just say, I don't really know what it is. My boss or my mom or my dad made me open one. I know that my money is, getting invested somehow. So in my opinion, that's a giant education gap and an opportunity to help an audience that needs to know the answer to both questions, know and understand the answer to both questions.
So what do you think of a Roth IRA as an emergency fund? I know that's something that's been getting kicked around, and even the idea of maybe employers helping their employees, with their Roth, like they do with their tax deferred stuff, just so they have the cushion that people didn't have during the whole COVID crisis.
I love that question, and I'll preface my answer with 2 disclosures. First, I do write about this in the missing second semester, so I have an opinion on it. Second, my opinion on the question differs if it's you and I talking one-on-one or me and a student talking one-on-one versus talking to a graduating class of, college or high school students. My opinion is it's an incredible value additive tool with the co-function of being there in an emergency situation. I absolutely think that students should view their Roth IRA as a core piece of their emergency preparedness. And the reason I prefaced my answer is, in a one-on-one situation, all of us need to have some level of emergency preparedness. So when we're sitting around a coffee table or to a student one-on-one, you say, yes, you need emergency fund. But when we speak to a class of students or a graduating class of students, statistically, not all will need it. And statistically, they all will need it at different times, which means to tell an entire student body to sock away all of your emergency in a zero interest rate bank account doesn't work quite as well as saying to that entire student body, if you do the same thing with your Roth IRA, a large percentage of you are going to benefit meaningfully from doing this. So I love that the discussion is being had, Bob. My opinion pretty strongly is that yes, a Roth IRA co-functions as an emergency fund and should do so.
So what do you think the main benefits of providing financial education assistance students versus FinTech that you don't get in a classroom or other ways of providing that education?
The short answer is scalability. Technology allows us to scale knowledge, experiences, and opportunity. And I've taught personal finance at the University of Pittsburgh for now 6 years. The class limit is 40 students, so it's a very small, intimate group where we do get to have one-on-one conversations. 100% of my students use technology. 100% of my students interact with me over technology. In the one-to-one personal conversation setting, it typically takes 5, 6, sometimes 7 classes for them to start opening up in person. Whereas with technology, they open up immediately. So I believe technology, in addition to being scalable, can also speed up the conversation and the accessibility to the information that students need.
Is there anything you need to do with that technology to make it, does it need to be very engaging, or is it just okay for it to be, financial education developed by technology? Or is it, some people believe in kind of the gaming aspects of things or making things very entertaining. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
There's a value to gamification, absolutely, but I don't believe that real money decisions should ever be gamified. And what I mean by that is I don't think that if a student or an individual has a trading account, they should get fireworks if they make a trade that puts a little bit extra money in their pocket. I'm okay with it within the context of a true financial education game. We have one we designed for the classroom, buy, sell, hold, it's called. And Next Gen Personal Finance shared their quiz bank with us, and it's a great educational game. It teaches long-term investing. It's fast, it's fun, it's addictive. I don't mind fireworks and fun in that setting because it's not real money. But the gamification of real money is a line that we have not crossed at Troutwood, and I personally would not feel comfortable crossing.
Yeah, it makes sense. So talking about other organizations that are thinking about doing financial literacy or investor education programs, what do you think, first of all, should they consider using some type of financial education technology with their programs? And then what are the big risks or considerations they need to be thinking about if they're gonna do that?
So I to your earlier question, I had said that scalability is an advantage of technology in the classroom and just in reaching a younger audience. One of the risks from an administration standpoint is sustainability. Taking time to invest in learning a new product or a new platform without the certainty or guarantee that new product or platform will be around, 2, 4, 5 years from now. And I say that just looking at I think there's a movement happening, not just across the country, but across the world right now, where Fintech is rising rapidly, particularly in areas of budgeting, basic investment calculators. There's an overwhelming number of options. And I know firsthand, talking with educators, that it's difficult for them because they're inundated with resources that they haven't vetted, that are difficult to vet. And it's a lot to overtake. The analogy that I've heard is similar to the Dodd-Frank legislation years ago that mandated banks to create financial literacy programs, which they did, but then inundated the educators with the resources, and educators, I think, felt ill-equipped to compare all of the available options. So sustainability, I think, is the question of the day. Which of these technologies and platforms will still be around a few years from now?
Is there a way to, so how do you determine that? I mean, is there something that people can do? I mean, obviously there's so many competing technologies out there. It must be pretty hard to figure out what's going to still be around.
I think it's a very difficult, and many, as an analogy, many of the Dodd-Frank tools, the reference Dodd-Frank tools the banks created no longer exist, right? They kind of disappeared. In terms of the platforms to bet on, I think it's, I would shy away from budgeting only tools. And I say that just from a development perspective. And what I've learned running a fintech company, you can, a good spreadsheet can very quickly be turned into a product. So you can take a basic, budgeting tool, even a, pre-built Excel model, give it to a good designer and have a work product quite quickly, which is why I think you see so much happening in the pure budgeting space. So I would look for products that are kind of one-off. To give a little kind of, I guess, context to that opinion, I ask my students at Pitt what they use. And I'd be interested to ask the audience, Bob, because when I asked them this question, I expected that the answer would be, I use Robinhood and Acorns. You would have been stunned at how diverse, I mean, TD, Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, Stash, M1. There was not like a clear winner in the classroom. Each student had a personal preference, personal opinion in the technology they used. So I think we'll probably see that same trend happen in the classroom, where teachers pick tools that they're comfortable with and share those with their students. And there'll be an upstream push too, where our students push tools upwards to us as instructors.
Yeah, that makes sense. So moving away from financial technology a bit, you have a lot of experience with financial literacy and investor education. So what have you learned about creating those types of programs, for yourself, your company, for CFA Pittsburgh, that you think other CFA societies or organizations should really understand?
So we, for the past 6 years, have partnered and led a Act 48 accredited personal finance conference for high school educators. Act 48 accredited simply means the attending educators get their continuing education credits in return for their participation. We've worked with CFA Society Philadelphia to make it a statewide effort, and even some state partnerships with at the state treasury level to help us get word of mouth out and get really good attendance. In terms of a quick summary for any other societies that are thinking maybe taking on this effort, Pennsylvania is somewhat unique from the standpoint of we have 584 school districts, each of which is administered by its own school board. So we don't have a state superintendent who can say, everyone do this, all 584 ready, go. It's an individual battle at each school to get personal finance on the curriculum. What we've learned administering this conference, in Bob, year one, so 6 years ago, not a single one of our attending schools or teachers had a mandated personal finance class. They all were being scrappy and getting the education into a math class or a home ec class or even an English class. Last year, we had 25 attendees where now personal finance was required to graduate. So that's kind of fun growth from 0 to 25 in 5 years, with this year being year number 6. The lesson I would give, and I'd boldface this to societies, because we as CFA charter holders are able to bring the finance knowledge to the table. Meeting us on that other side is the educators who know how to teach. And I think the strength of our programming is we don't tell teachers how to teach. We say, here's what we've learned and observed working in the finance and the investing industry. Here's how we think around this problem or this topic. How would you as a teacher solve it? And I think that's a big reason that our conference is so well attended and has been so impactful here in Pennsylvania. Transfer of ownership.
That number of going up to 25 is great. I am always very surprised that, everyone involved in education realizes how important money management skills are, but for some reason that we still don't have them mandated in the school system. I think part of it is, like you said, you don't necessarily have teachers that are comfortable with the with the topic area, but there's other ways to kind of get around that, I think, and you're doing a lot of that work yourself. So,
And Bob, can I feed on that real quick with a kind of a
Sure.
generational comment? Part of the reason as well is that our parents and our educators didn't necessarily have to, the traditional pension fund, reliance on Social Security. I give the analogy, my grandfather could have bought a house he couldn't afford or spent too much on a fishing trip, but he still had a pension. He still had Social Security. So he had a safety net that is quickly disappearing. So whereas around the dinner table, as each of us was growing up, our parents who were sitting there with us, they had that security blanket in many cases. As we learn about, defined benefit plans being less available, the conversation becomes more necessary. I frequently say the class of 2021, the upcoming class of 2022, 100% will be the CEO and CIO of their financial future. And that's a new paradigm.
Yeah. We asked that question to a lot of young students about, do they expect to have any kind of a safety net? And most of them, I'd say, close to all of them say no. So they are a lot of them focused on getting these skills wherever they can get them, because they know they're going to need them. So what is the likely future for Troutwood and the financial literacy program at CFA Pittsburgh?
So Troutwood, I believe, will provide most high school and college students with their first financial plan. It will be the place that they go to build a plan to achieve goals. I'm excited by that prospect. When I look in a classroom, and for years, Bob, I had referenced the 700 talks that I gave. I left a lot of those feeling a little bit hollow, and not because they weren't great experiences, but because you saw so much hope and enthusiasm in the eyes of these young minds, these students. But for most of it, I could just give them a fist bump and say, good luck. Glad you enjoyed this book, or glad you're in this class. I believe that with Troutwood, we have created an action step where they can take that hope that is in their heart and in their minds, pair it with a plan. And I strongly believe that hope, when paired with a plan, is a powerful combination. So I think we've created that kind of product and are going to fill that void in society. With regard to CFA Society Pittsburgh, we're going to keep doing exactly it is that we're doing here in our region, partnering with other member societies like Philadelphia, Atlanta, Rhode Island, Boston. There's so much great work being done by the member CFA societies. I could not be more proud to even just humbly be associated with that effort. As a charter holder, I believe it is our obligation to not just share what we've learned as part of that process of obtaining the charter, but give back to our communities with helping them prepare for the money choices that 100% of our constituents will make. So CFA Society of Pittsburgh will continue to, as an entire board, we unanimously believe in the effort and look forward to continuing to work with both our region, our member societies, and the Financial Literacy Network.
Great stuff, Gene. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode. Gene, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some of your insights into your financial literacy program at CFA Pittsburgh and what you are doing at Troutwood. It's been really interesting. We really thank you for being our guest today.
Bob, thank you.
So for you that are listening, there's several ways to get involved with the FLN and to get information about other programs and best practices in creating and managing financial literacy and investor education programs. We have a LinkedIn group, and now we have a website that you can reach, which is financialliteracynetwork.org. And there's also a general information email so you can ask questions, get connected, which is info@financialliteracynetwork.org. And then, of course, there's the FLN podcast that you're already taking advantage of. So thank you so much for joining us today.